Guess he finally compensated for something. That was my wife, Madison, loud enough for her three girlfriends to hear as I pulled my 1963 Corvette Stingray into our driveway in Memphis. They all laughed like it was the funniest thing they'd heard all week. I'm Tyler Brooks, 47 years old, and I've been running construction crews at Summit Construction for the past 15 years. The woman who just made that joke had no idea I'd been working double shifts for 2 solid years to afford that car. Every extra hour, every weekend when other guys went home to watch football, every holiday when I could have been relaxing, all of it went into a separate account Madison didn't know about. She thought I was just putting in overtime because I liked the work. Truth was, I'd been dreaming about owning that exact model since I was 12 years old. My dad, Walt Brooks, took me to a car show in Nashville back in 1988. There was this cherry red split-window Stingray with white racing stripes, and I couldn't take my eyes off it. Dad spent an hour talking to the owner about the 327 engine, the 4-speed manual transmission, the original chrome bumpers. See that fuel injection system, Ty? Dad pointed under the hood. Rochester fuel injection. Only made it 2 years before they went back to carburetors. This here's the real deal. The owner, an older guy in coveralls, grinned at my fascination. Your boy's got good taste. These split windows are special. Only made them 1 year, 1963. That rear window caused visibility problems, so they changed it in '64. Someday, Ty, Dad told me on the drive home, you'll have one just like that. Take care of it right, and it'll outlast both of us. Dad died 3 years ago from lung cancer. 40 years of Marlboro Reds finally caught up with him. He never saw me get that car, but I kept his words in my head every time I picked up an extra shift. The Corvette I'd just bought was exactly like the one from that car show. Original rally red paint, white stinger stripe, numbers matching 327 V8 putting out 300 horsepower. When I called Walt Gibson about his ad in Hemmings Motor News, he told me 3 other buyers were coming to look. I've got cash, I told him straight up. $47,000 and I can be there tomorrow. Hold on now, Walt said. Money's not everything. This car's been in my family 12 years. I want to know she's going to someone who understands what she is. When I showed up at Walt's place in Little Rock the next morning, he was waiting in his garage with the Corvette gleaming under fluorescent lights. Walt was 72, retired from the railroad, with hands that looked like they'd been working on engines since before I was born. Tell me about yourself, he said, not even looking at the cash envelope in my hand. I told him about Dad, about that car show, about working construction and saving every overtime dollar. Walt listened, nodding, running his fingers along the Corvette's fender like he was saying goodbye to an old friend. Your daddy teach you anything about engines? Some, mostly about respect. He always said you take care of your tools, they'll take care of you. Walt smiled. Same principle applies to everything worth having. He handed me the keys. She's yours, son. Your daddy would be proud. Now I was sitting in that dream car, listening to Madison's friends still giggling on the front porch. One of them, Brandy, said something about midlife crisis, and another, Jessica, mentioned how men always buy toys when they can't handle getting older. Madison was eating it up, nodding along like she was some kind of relationship expert. I got out slow, ran my hand along the perfect paint one more time. Not a single scratch or ding anywhere. The afternoon sun hit those chrome bumpers so bright it almost hurt to look at. "Tyler, honey," Madison called out, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "We were just talking about your new purchase." The girls think it's interesting timing. I walked past them without saying a word, went inside and grabbed a Budweiser from the fridge. Through the kitchen window, I could see them still sitting out there, probably picking apart every inch of my character. Madison's voice carried through the glass, something about men and their need to prove themselves. That night, after her friends left and she went to bed, I stood in the garage looking at the Corvette. The moonlight coming through the window made the red paint look almost black. I thought about my dad, about all those overtime hours, about missed dinners and canceled weekend plans. Something was shifting inside me, and I wasn't sure I liked where it was heading. Madison and I met 9 years ago at my buddy Greg Hoffman's wedding. Greg was an insurance adjuster who'd been through his own divorce 3 years before that. Don't rush into anything, he'd warned me back then. Make sure she wants you, not just what you can provide. Madison was working as a dental hygienist when we met, making decent money and talking about maybe going back to school for dental school herself. I was already established in construction, running a crew of 8 guys on commercial projects around Memphis. We were pulling down good money building medical centers, office complexes, the kind of steady work that pays the bills and then some. Those first few years were solid. We bought this house in Cordova, got married at a nice ceremony at her parents' church, and everything seemed to be moving in the right direction. But somewhere around year 4, she stopped working. Said she wanted to focus on making our home perfect, maybe start a family soon. The family part never happened, but the spending sure did. Designer clothes, expensive furniture, weekend trips with her girlfriends to Nashville or Atlanta. Always something new she absolutely had to have. I didn't mind working extra to give her nice things. That's what a husband does, right? But the comments started around year 6. Little digs about my work clothes, my truck, the way I looked when I came home covered in dust and concrete. She'd make jokes to her friends about being married to a construction worker, like it was something embarrassing. Like the money I brought home wasn't good enough, just the source of it. Tyler fixes things for a living, she'd tell people at parties with this laugh that made it sound like I was some kind of handyman instead of a project supervisor managing million-dollar jobs. My crew respected me. Jake Murphy, my foreman who'd been with me 15 years, always said I ran the tightest operation in Memphis. Brooks's crews don't mess around, he'd tell new hires. We finish on time, under budget, and nobody gets hurt. Last year, we completed the Westfield Medical Center 3 weeks early, saving the client $200,000 in interest payments. But Madison never asked about work anymore. Never wanted to hear about the challenges of coordinating concrete pours, managing subcontractors, or dealing with city inspectors who could shut down a project with one violation notice. The Corvette obsession became her favorite target. Every time I mentioned seeing one for sale or talked about finally having enough saved up, she'd roll her eyes. We could use that money for real things, Tyler, like remodeling the kitchen or taking a proper vacation. Last month, I found receipts in her purse from a shopping trip to Atlanta. $800 on clothes and shoes in one afternoon. When I asked about it, she said she deserved nice things after putting up with my boring car talk all the time. That's when I started noticing other things. How she never asked about my workday anymore. How she'd leave the room when I talked to my crew on the phone. How she seemed to light up only when I handed over my paycheck or when her friends came over to complain about their own husbands. 3 weeks ago, I drove past Riverside Park on my lunch break and saw her sitting on a bench with Derek Lane from next door. His wife Lindsay was out of town visiting her mother. They weren't just talking. Her hand was on his knee and he was playing with her hair. I didn't confront her, didn't say a word, but I did call Walt Gibson and told him I'd take the Corvette. Maybe that was the moment I started planning something I hadn't even admitted to myself yet. The night after her compensation comment, I couldn't sleep. Madison was out cold beside me, snoring lightly like she always did. I kept replaying the scene in the driveway, hearing her friends laugh at something I'd worked so hard for. At 2 a.m, I got up and went to the garage, turned on the overhead light, and just looked at the Corvette. It really was beautiful. Walt had told me stories about driving it to car shows, taking his grandson for rides, the pride he felt every time someone stopped to admire it. I restored her myself, he'd said during the handover. 10 years, piece by piece. Engine rebuild, new interior, paint job. But I kept everything original spec. No modifications, no modern upgrades. She's exactly like she rolled off the line in St. Louis in 1963. That's what I'd imagined for myself. Taking care of something valuable. Being part of a community that understood quality and craftsmanship. Instead, I got public humiliation. I opened the glove compartment and pulled out the registration papers. Everything was in my name. Title, insurance, all of it. Madison had no claim to this car. Hell, she had no claim to most of our assets if it came to that. The house was bought with money I'd earned, the furniture, the vacations, even her car, all paid for with overtime hours while she spent her days doing whatever she wanted. That's when it hit me. I was 47 years old and I was living like a prisoner in my own life. I went back inside and opened my laptop. Started looking at apartment listings in Little Rock, about 2 hours away. Found a 1-bedroom place at Riverloft Apartments near the Arkansas River. Month-to-month lease available immediately. The rent was less than what Madison spent on clothes in a month. Then I looked up divorce lawyers, read about asset division, about what happens when one spouse has been financially dependent on the other, about proving adultery in Arkansas and how it affects settlements. By morning, I had a plan. For the next 2 weeks, I played the perfect husband. Complimented Madison's cooking, asked about her day, even suggested we take a weekend trip to Nashville like she'd been wanting. She ate it up, probably thought her little joke had put me in my place. But I was moving money, opening an account in Little Rock, forwarding my mail to a post office box, taking pictures of receipts, documenting her spending, building a file. The hardest part was acting normal when I saw Derek next door. He'd wave from his yard like nothing was happening, like he wasn't screwing my wife while his own wife was visiting family. I waved back every time. Meanwhile, Rick Turner from Riverstone Builders had been trying to recruit me for months. He'd heard about our Westfield project and wanted me to run his historic renovation division in Little Rock. "You've got a reputation for quality work," he'd told me over beers after a construction trade show. "I need someone who understands that some things are worth doing right, even if they take longer." Rick was about my age, divorced himself about 5 years back. "Marriage fell apart when she decided my paycheck was more important than I was," he'd said. Best thing that ever happened to me, honestly. Now I wake up every morning in my own place, doing work I love, and nobody's there to tell me I'm not good enough. Yesterday I put in my notice at Summit Construction. Told my supervisor I was transferring to Little Rock to work with Rick. He understood. Good supervisors were always in demand, and Rick's offer was too good to pass up. Jake Murphy shook my hand and said, "Wherever you go, boss, you'll do fine. You taught us what it means to take pride in our work." Tonight was the night. Madison was hosting another one of her friend gatherings tomorrow, planned to show off some new furniture she'd bought with my credit card. Perfect timing. I packed one bag and put it in the Corvette's trunk. Everything else I owned could be replaced. Some things were more important than others. I was about to find out what freedom felt like. The next morning, I waited until Madison was in the shower to load the last of my important papers into the Corvette. Bank statements, insurance policies, the documentation I'd been gathering. Everything fit in a briefcase that slid perfectly behind the passenger seat. My phone rang. Derek from next door. "Hey Tyler, you heading to work early today? Saw you loading up the car." "Something like that," I said, not bothering to hide the edge in my voice. There was a pause. "Everything okay, man? You sound a little off." I looked toward his house, wondered if he was watching from his window. "Everything's fine, Derek. Just fine." After I hung up, I realized he'd seen me packing. That meant he'd probably mention it to Madison when they had their next little meetup. I needed to move faster. I left a note on the kitchen counter. Simple and clean. "Madison, I've gone to Little Rock to think things through. Need some time away. We'll call in a few days. Tyler." No explanation, no drama, just facts. I was backing out of the driveway when my phone started buzzing. Text from Madison. "Where are you going with your car? Derek said you were packing." Another buzz. "Tyler, answer me. What's going on?" "This isn't funny." "Come back home right now." I turned off my phone and headed for the interstate. The drive to Little Rock took exactly 2 hours and 15 minutes. The Corvette handled like a dream, smooth and powerful. I had the windows down, radio playing classic rock, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Highway 40 stretched out ahead of me, and every mile put more distance between me and 9 years of feeling like I wasn't good enough. Riverloft Apartments was in a converted warehouse downtown. Nothing fancy, but it had character. Exposed brick walls, big windows overlooking the Arkansas River. Rick Powers, the landlord, was waiting for me with keys. "Nice ride," he said, nodding at the Corvette. "Don't see many of those in original condition." "She's been well cared for," I said. "I can tell. Garage space comes with the apartment if you want it. Extra $50 a month. I'll take it." That evening, I finally turned my phone back on. 17 missed calls from Madison. 8 voicemails. A dozen texts that got progressively angrier. The first voicemail was confused. "Tyler, what are you doing? Your note doesn't make any sense. Call me." The third one was irritated. "Okay, this is ridiculous. I don't know what kind of midlife crisis you're having, but you need to come home." By the 7th, she was furious. "Fine, stay gone, but you're not taking that stupid car away from me." I helped pay for it too. That was interesting. She'd never contributed $1 toward the Corvette. Never contributed much toward anything, actually. The last voicemail came in around 9 p.m. "Tyler, Derek told me he saw you packing like you were leaving for good." That's not what this is it? You can't just walk away from 9 years of marriage over a joke. "Call me back." I didn't call back. Instead, I drove the Corvette down to the riverfront and parked overlooking the water. The Arkansas River was wide and dark, with lights from the downtown buildings reflecting off the surface. I'd never seen Little Rock at night before. It was prettier than I'd expected. The next morning, I started my new job with Riverstone Builders. Rick Turner met me at the office with coffee and a stack of blueprints. "Welcome to Arkansas," he said. "Ready to build something worth building?" The project was a 1920s mansion downtown that had been chopped up into apartments in the 1960s. Our job was to restore it back to its original glory. Hardwood floors, crown molding, period-correct fixtures. The kind of detailed work I'd always wanted to do, but never had time for in Memphis. Previous contractor cut corners, Rick explained, showing me photos of the damage. Covered up original woodwork with drywall, painted over carved details, installed cheap fixtures. We're going to do it right, even if it takes twice as long. The crew was smaller than what I was used to, just 6 guys, but they all knew their trades. Tommy Wright, the Finnish carpenter, had been restoring historic homes for 20 years. This place has good bones, he told me on our first walkthrough. Just needs someone who understands what it's supposed to be. During lunch break, Rick asked about the Corvette parked in the company lot. Always wanted one of those, he said. What year? 63. Bought her 3 weeks ago. Good investment. They're only going up in value. He paused, studying my face. You look like a man with a story. Getting divorced, I said. Wife didn't appreciate the car. Rick nodded slowly. My ex-wife didn't appreciate much either. That's why she's an ex. He took a sip of his coffee. Let me guess, she thought you should spend the money on something practical instead. How'd you know? Same story, different details. My wife wanted me to sell my motorcycle and buy a minivan. Said it was time to grow up. Rick laughed, but there was no humor in it. Funny thing was, she was the one acting like a teenager, spending money we didn't have, flirting with other guys at parties, making me feel like an idiot for working 60-hour weeks to keep us afloat. What happened? Caught her with my business partner. Turns out they'd been planning to push me out of my own company and run off together. Rick shook his head. Cost me half my assets, but I got to keep my dignity. Started this company from scratch 5 years ago. Best decision I ever made. That evening, I called my brother Austin in Nashville. He was the only family I had left since Dad died. I told him about Madison, about Derek, about the move to Little Rock. Jesus, Tyler, why didn't you say something sooner? What was I going to say? That my wife was treating me like her personal bank account? That she was screwing the neighbor? You could have talked to me. I'm your brother. Austin was an electrician. Divorced himself about 10 years back. His wife had left him for a guy with more money, took half his tools and his truck in the settlement. I learned something important from that mess, he said. A woman who really loves you doesn't make you feel small. She builds you up. I needed to figure it out myself, I said. Austin was quiet for a minute. What about the house? Your business contacts? You're just walking away from everything? The house is mortgaged to the limit because of her spending. My business contacts know my reputation. That follows me anywhere. And Madison? She'll do the same thing she's been doing for 3 years. Nothing. That weekend, I hired a lawyer named Carol Reynolds. She had 28 years of experience in family law and a reputation for being thorough. We met in her office Saturday morning and I laid out everything. The financial records showing Madison's spending versus her zero income. The photos I'd taken of her with Derek. The documentation of her pattern of public disrespect and emotional abuse. This is very comprehensive, Carol said, flipping through the folder. How long have you been planning this? Honestly, I think I've been planning it for 2 years without realizing it. Every overtime shift, every extra dollar I saved, every time she made me feel small, I was building toward this moment. Your wife's going to fight for half of everything. Let her try. The house is underwater because of her credit card debt. The only real asset is my construction business, and that's built on relationships and reputation, not physical property. Carol pulled out a calculator. Let's talk numbers. What's your annual income? Base salary $95,000 plus overtime usually brings it to around $120,000. Madison hasn't worked in 3 years. What about alimony? She's 35 years old and healthy. She can get a job. Carol smiled. I like working with clients who've done their homework. In Arkansas, adultery is grounds for fault-based divorce. With your documentation, we can argue against permanent alimony. We'll file the papers Monday morning. Sunday evening, I was sitting on my apartment balcony when Madison called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Tyler, we need to talk. I'm listening. This is crazy. You can't just throw away our marriage because of one stupid comment. It wasn't one comment, Madison. It was 9 years of them. I was joking. My friends know I was joking. Your friends know you've been humiliating your husband for years while he worked overtime to pay for your lifestyle. That's not how it was. How was it? She couldn't answer. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow, I said. Tyler, please. I know things haven't been perfect, but we can fix this. I can change. You had 9 years to change. I'm done waiting. I hung up and turned off my phone. Tomorrow would be interesting. Monday morning, Carol filed the divorce papers. By law, Madison had to be served within 30 days. I asked Carol to wait 2 weeks before having her served. I wanted to be settled in my new life before the legal war started. The mansion restoration was going better than expected. We'd uncovered original parquet floors under the carpeting, and Tommy had found hand-carved crown molding hidden behind dropped ceilings. Someone really loved this place once, he said, carefully removing layers of paint from an oak banister. You can tell by the attention to detail. Wednesday evening, my phone rang. Unknown number. Tyler, this is Lindsay, Derek's wife. My blood went cold. Hey, Lindsay. I got back from visiting my mom yesterday. Derek's been acting strange, guilty about something. I found text messages on his phone. She paused. They were from your wife. I'm sorry you had to find out that way. How long have you known? About a month. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? She was quiet for a long time. Probably not then. Another pause. What are you going to do? Same thing you should do. Derek's packing his stuff tonight. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. Good for you, Lindsay. I'm sorry about Madison. About all of it. You deserve better. So do you. After we hung up, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Validation. Someone else had seen what I'd been living with and they understood why I'd left. Friday morning, Madison called from a number I didn't recognize. Tyler, Derek told his wife about us. I know, she called me. You knew about us and you didn't tell her? That wasn't my job. She's divorcing him. She's taking everything. His business, the house, their savings. Good for her. Tyler, this is serious. People are talking. Everyone knows what happened. Let them talk. My friends think I'm a terrible person. Are you? Don't do that. Don't make me the villain here. Madison, you cheated on me with a married man while I worked overtime to pay for your lifestyle. Then you publicly humiliated me for buying something I'd dreamed about since I was a kid. You made yourself the villain? I can explain, no need. My lawyer will be in touch soon. That weekend, I took the Corvette out to Hot Springs, drove the winding mountain roads, felt the engine respond to every curve, stopped at a classic car show and spent the afternoon talking to other owners about restoration, about the joy of finding something special and taking care of it. An older man with a 1965 Mustang struck up a conversation. That's a beautiful split window. Original $327. Numbers matching, I said. Bought her from Walt Gibson in Little Rock. Walt's a good man. Been in the hobby 40 years. He extended his hand. I'm Bill Crawford. You new to the area? I told him about the divorce, about starting over in Arkansas. Bill nodded like he'd heard the story before. Went through something similar myself 15 years ago. Wife thought my car hobby was a waste of money. Wanted me to sell everything and buy a bigger house. He gestured around the car show. Look around you. See all these guys? Most of us have similar stories. We found each other through our cars, became a family of sorts. That's what it's all about, said another owner who'd joined our conversation. Not everyone understands the connection between a man and his machine, but when you find the right one, it's worth everything you put into it. Driving home that evening, watching the sunset paint the Arkansas sky orange and purple, I thought about what they'd said. The right connection was worth everything you put into it. I'd learned that lesson about more than just cars. 2 weeks later, Carol called with news. Madison was served this morning. She wants to meet with you, with both of us. She says she has an offer. Thursday came. Madison looked smaller somehow, sitting across from me in Carol's conference room. Her lawyer, a nervous young guy named Bradley, did most of the talking. My client recognizes that the marriage has irreconcilable differences, he started. Your client committed adultery, Carol interrupted. We have photos. Madison's face went red. Those photos don't prove anything. Carol slid a folder across the table. Actually, they do, along with witness statements from neighbors, phone records, and bank statements showing how you've been spending your husband's money while contributing nothing to the household. Bradley looked through the folder and his expression changed. Mrs. Brooks, you didn't mention the extent of the documentation. The settlement was swift. Madison got 6 months to find employment and transition out of the house. No alimony, no claim to my business assets. She kept her car and personal belongings. I kept my dignity and my Corvette. 6 months later, I got word from Austin that Madison had moved back in with her parents in Nashville. She'd found work as a dental hygienist again, but the pay was half what she used to make. Derek's divorce had been even messier. Lindsay got everything. I'd settled into Little Rock like I'd lived there my whole life. The mansion project was featured in Arkansas Home magazine, and Rick was getting calls from clients specifically asking for my crew. I was making more money doing work I actually enjoyed. Last week, I met a woman named Sarah at a coffee shop near my apartment. She was a teacher, recently divorced herself, and when she saw me getting out of the Corvette, her first words were, "Beautiful car." Classic lines never go out of style. We talked for an hour about dreams deferred and second chances, about the difference between people who build things up and people who tear them down. I never thought I'd thank someone for mocking my dreams, but Madison's cruel laughter taught me the difference between settling for disrespect and demanding the life I deserved.